We are on Derech Hashem. We're on page 446. So the Ramchal explains how the spirit of Navot reinforces the words of false prophets. This means that all of those false prophets who are prophesying in Achav's presence before his very eyes, which is in verse 10, he explains that the Achav's prophets were prophesying before the two kings. Based upon the principles governing prophecy, that were mentioned throughout this book chapter. So the Ramchal will now explain how he understands their actions. I just said about you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we're on page 446. I misjudged you. I thought if you don't hear, then you're not going to be here. That is, okay. They were performing those actions and attempting those same matters through which the revelation of prophecy is drawn downwards. So he says they were performing the same procedures that true prophets do when they attempt to attain a state of prophecy, like having music played before them. And the reason why they would have music played before them is because one has to be happy in order to receive prophecy. If one is sad, disconsolate, then one, or angry for that matter, one will not be able to receive prophecy. The question is, so if that's the case, how did Jeremiah, very sad guy, receive it? So the answer is he was happy. He wasn't happy with the message, but he was a happy guy. Okay, that's how they explain it. Now they were attempting only to draw downwards a revelation of the Tumah that we mentioned previously, and nothing more. This is the false prophets again. But they were deceiving the king, demonstrating to him as if they were drawing downwards a revelation of Hashem's illumination. They were attempting, anyhow, to bring downward some sort of revelation before him. And in truth, the revelation that they were seeking, emanated toward them. And also, although they made a show of seeking true prophecy before Achav, they actually were accessing the forces of Tumah. They did not mistakenly think they had a genuine prophecy. Remember, he says, you have to remember what the Ramchal has been holding here. He said, if you have a true prophecy, you're going to know it, and you're going to know when you don't have a true prophecy. So if these people are coming out with false prophecy, I think 400 we said, so if 400 false prophecies there, they all know themselves that what they're saying is false. They all know themselves that what they're doing is pulling from the Tumah that exists. So, but they don't let anybody else know. And remember, they're doing that because they want kavod. They want the honor and everything else. So that's what they're doing. This was done before the eyes of the king to strengthen his faith in them. This is what the verse says, that all the prophets were prophesying before them. Now, what emanated towards them in that defiled prophecy were the following words: go up and triumph. Hashem will deliver Ramot Gilad into the king's hands. These are the words with which that spirit had spoken through their mouths in order to convince Achav to go to battle. After the predictions of the false prophets, the true prophet Michayahu is called, who relates in his prophecy how the spirit conspired to feed the false prophets false information. By the way, that's not one of the famous prophets, just so we should understand. We have a lot of prophets that aren't. That's his name.
What's his name in English?
I have no idea. Michayahu. I don't know. Michayahu would be in English. I mean, I don't know how to spell it. It's just crazy spelling. I don't know how to say it. But it's Michayahu is how you say it. But if you look at it, it's a crazy spelling. But the point is that when we're going through Nach in general, we should be aware that while people know the big prophets, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and so on and so forth, there's a lot of other prophets that were walking around that had prophecy. The difference between a guy like Michayahu and Yirmiyahu is Jeremiah had a prophecy that would talk to generations. That's why he gets a book. Ezekiel gets a book for the same reason. but the prophets that did not have a message for the generations were recorded for what they did, some of them. But in general, there were, again, a lot of people that they had schools of prophecy. So you had a lot of people going around. Some were very well acknowledged as prophets, but you're not going to know all of them. This one we happen to know because of what he says. Okay. So it is not as if they themselves were misled, because they knew that what they had attempted to do. And Ramchal is stating here that in contrast to Tzidkiyahu, who, although he was a false prophet, erred in what he believed to be a true element within the prophecy. The other prophets knew clearly that their predictions were not genuine. Okay, so rather it was Achav who erred about them and was enticed into believing them to the extent that he no longer believed the words of Michiyahu, the real prophet, who prophesied that Achav would be killed in battle because of his great belief in what he was seeing in his own false prophets. And if you go to the story again, I send you to the story because there's some elements here that he's not bringing up. Namely, this Michiyahu, whenever whenever he would prophesy about Achav, it was always to the negative. So Achav says to Tzidkiyahu that whenever, I think it's, who's the king with him? I forget. Yehoshaphat, sorry. So he says, Yehoshaphat said to him, let's call this guy. And he says so Achav says to Yehoshaphat, whenever I call him, this guy always gives me bad reports. He doesn't like me. So it's not only that he was bolstering himself with the other prophets, he also had a preconceived notion that Michayahu would not give a good prophecy anyway. So he had already a prejudice against this person. Either way, it was time for Achav to die. So Hashem, this is Bill and Bill's the only one in the class. So in the Hebrew class, we just read the Hebrew story in Hebrew of the emperor with no clothes. Where if you're wise, only the wise people can see the clothes, and so on and so forth. This is basically what Achav was doing. He was allowing himself to be misled, even though that this Michayahu was a true prophet, and he told them what was going to happen. He said, I'd rather not listen to you. You are always giving prophecies of doom. I don't like the prophecies of doom. I like the other guys who tell me this. It would remind me of a story that I once read. It was, I guess, a joke, a strange sort of joke, where there was two Jews sitting in I guess, what do you call it, a bus station. So one was reading Die Stürmer. The Die Stürmer was a German paper which was very anti-Semitic. Said that, right? Am I correct? Die Stürmer? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was very anti-Semitic. It was very, with the Jews, the power, they're everything, and they're destroying the world, and so on and so forth. So the Jewish guy, his friend, says to him, no, Moshe, why are you reading that? It's the worst paper in the world. He said, I have a choice. I can either read the paper that says we're dying, or we run the world. I'd rather read the one we run the world. So that's the same thing here. Whether or not that ever happened, I have no idea, but it's Holocaust humor, if you will. But it's that's the thing that's happening here. That Achav said, I'd rather not listen to this guy. He's always telling me gloom and doom. I'm going to die. Everybody's going to die. Fine. I'd rather listen to the other guys who told 400 people told me I must be, that I'm going to do well. If 400 people tell me that global warming is true, it must be true. Doesn't matter that one person says no. Okay? Even if I do believe this guy and he's a good scientist. What's that?
Tell me what I want to hear.
Tell me what I want to hear, right. No, it's only because you told me that they're making a law that if you don't believe in it, they're going to be in jail or fine you or something. So
there are some people trying to, yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
So the world is getting crazier as we go. That's all it means.
More consensus.
Right. Okay, so now the Ramchal explains one more key facet to that incident. He said, however, Tzidkiyahu ben how do you say it in Hebrew? It'll be easier. Yeah, I had to look at the Hebrew for that one. Kanana. It's these words sometimes when they translate are horrible. Okay, went even further than those other prophets. Excuse me. For they only spoke according to what was drawn to them in the spirit of Navot, and again they were ordinary false prophets who associated themselves with the forces of Tuma, deceiving those around them to believe that they were true prophets, and whatever revelations they received only lent to their deception. But Tzidkiah enlarged on what they did, doing something similar to what true prophets do. And he explains he used iron horns in relating his prophecy, similar to the actions that the true prophets are sometimes requested to perform with their prophecy, as we learned before. This happened because he believed in the revelation, since it was stronger than the revelations he usually received through the forces of evil. And he explains he could not tell that it was still emanating from the forces of Tuma. He therefore thought that it was real and emanating from Hashem. So much so that he brazenly declared, "So said Hashem, with these you shall gore Aram." And the verse states that he made himself iron horns and proclaimed that Achav would gore Aram with him. Now he was not properly trained in the ways of true prophecy, and he therefore could not discern the difference between false prophecy and true prophecy. And he explains this, he is thus different from the other prophets who were knowingly predicting a false prophecy through the forces of evil. Although he too had initially attempted to attach himself to those forces, he mistakenly believed that he was experiencing true prophecy this time. This was the result of the intensification of the revelation of Tuma created by the spirit of Navot. And in this way, he was similar to an authentic prophet who had not yet reached full maturity and may err. He too forsake a false revelation originating from the forces of Tuma for a true prophecy emanating from Hashem. Now, the reason they want to even, I believe, give him the side of merit is because he says, because he's prophesying in the name of Hashem, as compared to anything else. You will win, but when you start saying, "Thus says Hashem," so certainly in those days, there was tremendous fear of using God's name in vain. So you want to avoid that because it's blasphemy. That's the death penalty. As compared to saying, the prophecy is blah. So that's probably why they wanted to give this person the side of, why the Ramchal wants to give him the side of merit, to say that he was already tricked. He himself was tricked, which is why he used Hashem's name. So this one. Therefore, Chazal in the Gemara state about him that he said what he had not heard. And the Gemara there gives Tzidkiah as an example of the Mishnah's case of a false prophet who says something that he did not hear. In this case, Tzidkiah proclaims his prophecy in the name of Hashem, so said Hashem, which he had not heard, and performs an act with horns, which Hashem never commanded him to do. In contrast, the other false prophets were reporting what they heard. However, they knew it had come from a false source. They also said in the spirit of Navot, they also said that the spirit of Navot misled him. And the Gemara there asks how Tzidkiah could be held accountable if he was misled by the type of experience generated by the spirit of Navot. And they said further that he should have been more discerning in the falseness of this prophecy, as Yehoshaphat had warned him. And he wouldn't have been misled. If he had proper training, he would have recognized the difference between a false revelation and true prophecy. So Yehoshaphat warned him that no true prophets ever prophesy in the same style. And so the Ramchal explained that each prophet had his own style of speech, but in the episode with Achav, all 400 prophets said the exact same words in the same style. Yehoshaphat thus proclaimed that they were false and called for an authentic prophet. Sidkiah should have realized from that his own prophecy, identical to all the others, must be also be false. This is the Gemara's answer as to why he was culpable. Again, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all the time. Okay, so the guy should have realized himself that he was a faker, and that even if he's getting this belief that God's speaking to him, then he should have checked himself at the door, and maybe gone to a rabbi, to a prophet at those times, and said, "I have a problem. I've been lying up till now. I wonder if they had AA for prophets, false prophets, because that's false prophets. But that a similar thing where they would have had that group. I don't know, but in truth, those prophets experienced at that very moment a revelation greater than they were accustomed to perceive, and in a different way than what they were accustomed to until Tzidkiah erred and imagined that this time his prophecy was real, even though the efforts were made only on the side of Tumah, as we explained. But this was orchestrated by Hashem, as we have mentioned, and you should understand this matter properly. So he said, the spirit of Navos made their prophecy seemingly more real than normal in order to persuade Achav to begin his ill-fated campaign against Aram. And the Ramchal concludes this chapter after having taught 4 ways in which a prophet may err. The first is a disciple who is not yet a full prophet might not realize that he is experiencing the beginning of prophecy, as with Moshe Rabbeinu and Shmuel. Number 2, an undistinguished prophet may err by not properly carrying out the mission he is sent on, as we saw, as with the prophet sent to Yeravam. Number 3, a prophet may not understand all the ramifications of his prophecy, as with Yonah. And number 4, he may be a false prophet who deliberately attaches himself to the force of Tumah and is misled, as with Tzidkiah. But a full-fledged prophet will never make any mistake regarding the authenticity of the vision that he has seen, its implementation, or its interpretation. So the Ramchal puts a lot of pressure on prophecy and knowing what your prophecy is. And he says, if you really do the work, you will never be misled. Now, we don't have prophecy today anyway, so it's a purely theoretical concept that's going on, but it's an interesting one that you would know right away whether or not you are having, if you were trained properly, you would know right away whether or not you're having a true prophecy, or if you just had a bad case of bad part of cholent, whatever it's going to be. So the Ramchal introduced in our chapter 5, we're looking at the differences between Moshe Rabbeinu and all the other prophets. So the Ramchal introduces the concept of variant levels of prophecy. The levels of prophecy are generally divided into 2. 1, the level of all prophets other than Moshe Rabbeinu, alav hashalom, and the second, the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, alav hashalom, and that means may he rest in peace. It's the easiest way in English. Okay, so the Hashem himself distinguished between them in this manner and explained the difference between them as is written in the verses. If there shall be a prophet among you in a vision, shall I Hashem make myself known to him? Not so, my servant Moshe. So the Ramchal is going to elaborate on the specific differences between the prophecy of Moshe and the other prophets. Learn from these verses. So the Ramchal first describes prophecy of all other prophets other than Moshe Rabbeinu. So the general rule for all prophets other than Moshe is that their prophecy manifests itself through a vision or a dream. The prophet receives his prophecy through a dream while he is in a sleep-like state. As the Ramchal will explain, he also receives his prophecy through images. Okay, and let's go. So it says, this is as the aforementioned verse states, in a vision shall I make myself known to him, in a dream shall I speak to him. We thus see both elements of ordinary prophecy. It is a vision, and it occurs in a dream-like state. That is, Hashem uses a dream, which is already embedded in the nature of people, as a medium through which he draws a prophecy to the prophet. And he explains of all the various physiological in function of a person's sight, hearing, Hashem chose the dream as a function for establishing his prophecies. Right? This does not mean that prophecy and dreaming are of the same category. Rather, it means that the medium of the dream is deemed suitable by the divine wisdom as a means of drawing prophecy downward. And what you're looking at, by the way, is this is your meditative stance. In other words, that's why they always say you have to meditate to have a dream, to have a prophecy. Because when I'm meditating, for those who like to meditate, then you have a couple of different ways to meditate. You have more than a couple, but what you're doing basically is freeing. Well, one is freeing your mind, one is focusing your mind. You have those two opposites that go on, but you're trying to allow the thoughts, as it were, to pass through you. That's how they describe it. Again, if I could be focusing on a candle, the light of the candle, the flame, and I become very focused on that, and I push everything's. The way I think Aryeh Kaplan says is, you push it away slowly, you just let it go, and you're not restricted anymore. When that happens, if you constantly practice at that, so then whatever method of meditation you're using, so now you allow your mind to open and hear things. What you'll hear is the humming in the background here. In case you don't hear over my wonderful voice, there's a humming going on here. Okay, and the more I would allow you to drift, the more you would realize what other sounds are here, and then you'd hear the cars passing us, and the more and more aware of you. But you would also, at the same time, you'd have to let it go. You couldn't concentrate on it. What happens when you're walking and you hear a plane? What's the normal reaction of people? You look up. You look up where you want to see it. Now, I was just at the college campus, and I heard the plane. I'm looking here. I'm looking where it should be. It's not. It's behind me, because of where the echoes are. But when I saw it, I was like, "Whoa, that's a big plane." But we'll all look to see what the sound is, okay? And because we want to focus on it. And when you're in a house, this is horrible for kids. When the parents go out and they're sitting and they're lying in their room, lights are off, and they just finished watching some stupid, scary show, and suddenly they hear the creaks, because a house settles. Now, if the parents were there, or the TV was on, whatever, they wouldn't hear it. It's only when the lights go off, and then they start hearing everything. They're super sensitive. That's when they can see everything. All the little monsters come out of the closets, everything else. But that's what happens, because we become sensitive to it, and if we would just push it away, which we do as adults, we learn to push things away. So we just say, okay, there's a noise, I'm not going to get worried about it. The alarm went off, bang outside. I mean, if you hear a gunshot, you'll probably wake up. But otherwise, some people can sleep through storms, because they know a storm is coming. Okay, I know it's coming, leave me alone. And they'll go sleepy through it. So that's what, like I said, there's a meditation going on here, which he's not saying, he's saying dream-like, but I'm telling you it's a meditation. And when Chazal said in the Gemara, dream is 1/60th of prophecy, they did not mean anything other than that it contains within it a message to be related and information beyond the information that people would usually expect to receive within the confines of their natural intellect, as we have explained above. So it says, from the words of the Gemara, we could mistakenly understand that dreaming is a weaker form of prophecy. So he says, no, it's not. And then the Ramchal explains that the Gemara's comparison of a dream to prophecy concerns only the information received in a dream, since dreams can contain images in accordance with what the soul perceives in the spiritual realms. In this one respect, it has a minute commonality with prophecy. But as Ramchal emphasizes, prophecy is a very high spiritual level that must be acquired and not merely some sort of a dream. So again, if you have a dream that you won the mega box, well, just say amen to it, but I don't think it's really going to happen. Maybe you should, if you have that dream though, make sure you know what the numbers were and play them. You can't lose. You'll only lose $1. Okay, when the chef of prophecy intensifies upon the prophet, he is freed from his emotions and senses and falls into a deep slumber. So he explains, the Ramchal stated above, the prophecy begins with divine revelation and then progresses to full prophecy through an intensification of Shefa. He now explains how the medium of dreaming becomes a vehicle for transmitting the prophecy. And he explained that during prophecy, the prophet is physically overwhelmed and his senses are incapacitated. So he continues, he falls into a deep sleep while his thoughts remain intact in the same manner as the thoughts of one who is sleeping and dreaming. In other words, his cognitive abilities are limited to sleep-like state. Only then will prophecy be drawn toward him. And he says, the Ramchal stated above, that a person's physical nature cannot sustain anything truly spiritual, and certainly not prophecy. The person can thus prophesy only when his bodily functions cease. So he said, it is possible that this experience will come upon the prophet while he is awake in the same way as that we have mentioned. Prophecy can come upon the prophet in the middle of the day. He will then lose function of the body and sink into a deep sleep-like state. Rav Chaim Friedlander gives the example of Avram Avinu, but who has written, a deep sleep came over Avram when he was getting the vision of the, what do they call it? Ben Avatarim. I don't know, it's between the pieces. So the vision between the pieces, where he's told that his children will go into slavery for 400 years. It says he went into a deep sleep. So the Ramchal is using that as a proof that when that one who would receive this would have to be falling into deep sleep, or that sort of thing. Fine. But it is also possible the prophecy will emanate toward him when he is sleeping in the form of a nocturnal dream, and that explains while he is asleep he will start prophesying. But this is not the same thing as a dream. Rather, the Shefa will come upon him in this prophecy with full awareness. At any rate, prophecy will not come upon him until he is in a state outside his senses and has sunk into that deep slumber. Whether the prophecy occurs during the day or night, the prophet will prophesy only when he is no longer in control of his senses. It is possible that, and by the way, why is that important? He keeps emphasizing that. Why do you think that's important? Anybody want to venture a guess? Immortalized by YouTube?
I don't know how he remembers. If he's totally incapacitated, how does he remember the dream when he wakes up?
God makes sure he does that. Okay, that'd be one thing. No, I don't think that's not it. You never remembered a dream?
Oh yeah.
That's all. So if you can remember a dream because it impacted on you in such a manner, you remember everything about the dream, you remember the feelings you had. So that could be what we're talking about. But the question is, why does Hashem need us to be incapacitated to do this?
Get your full attention.
Close to what I want to say. It's when I'm awake, I'm going to fight it. I'm not going to listen. I'm not receptive. Nobody wants to, today, because of Bluetooth, you can walk around and talk to somebody and nobody thinks you're nuts. But in the old days, before Bluetooth or before all these things that we had, if you would start talking to somebody, people would just declare you as insane. Nobody wants to be insane or considered insane. So we learn to turn off a lot of things. And even if we're trying to get there, we're trying to get hooked up with the Shefa, we're afraid of it. Think about that. I mean, no matter who you are, you're going to be afraid of it. You don't want to hear it. You think you do. It's like if Mashiach would come today. Mashiach. He would come. He would say, he stops by the Torah Center and says, I'm here, I'm Mashiach, and you see the world and you hear the announcement made, the horns blowing, whatever in your machinations of imagination are going to drop of what Mashiach is going to be. What are you going to say to Mashiach when he says, okay, it's time to go to Eretz Yisrael? What are you going to say? Can I just have a couple more minutes? Let me check you out. Whose son are you? Where do you come from? What's going on here? You say you're Mashiach. Prove it. We're not just going to jump on the bandwagon. Nobody does. Nobody's willing to throw their money into the pot that quickly. We want to make sure about these things. We want to see the news report. We want to hear everything else. Right? That's Mashiach, because we're awake, we're aware, and we don't want to rock the boat. Mashiach, saying the real Mashiach. I'm not saying any fake guy here. The real Mashiach will come. We would argue on him left and right.
I'd probably dash over here and get a copy of your job.
Job description, okay. Right. Get the copy of the job description quick. Do you feel this? Okay. For those who don't know, what was it called? Defining Mashiach? I forget what it's. Look online, I don't know. But it's, job description's there. The future Judas. The real Mashiach, please stand up. That's what it's called. Okay. It was a Sunday lecture. Okay, yeah. But, right, the job description, but you're not going to pull it on. Even if he would fill every single one of these things, you'd still say, I don't know. Because we're not really comfortable with that.
We've had so many false messiahs.
Again, we're not comfortable with it. I'm agreeing, we're not comfortable. When somebody comes to you and says, I love when they do this, thus saith the Lord. I said, since when does God speak Old English? At least update the English for me, okay? But when they say God said blah blah, you look at this guy and say, oh my God, what a charlatan you are. Give me a break. God's not speaking to anybody. We have our Gemaras, everything else. So if God would speak to us today through our loudspeakers, okay, beautiful loudspeakers, whoever wants to donate to Midwest Torah Center, we have to pay off the bills. Okay. But nonetheless, if God would speak through the things, we would say, okay, it's a joke. Somebody's working the system. We'll never accept it. When I'm in a dream, when I don't have those senses blocking me, the physicality blocking me, so then I can already accept. Because I'm in that mode. I'm going to accept it much easier than if I'm not in that mode. So that's what I think is going on, why he constantly has to emphasize you have to be in that sleep-like mode. Okay, that's what I believe. Could be wrong, and again, I always open that up to say if anybody can prove me wrong, I'll be more than happy to back off from that. But I think that's why he constantly forces this person to be in a deep slumber or whatever else is going to be. Okay, so we're on. You don't have a book anymore. Okay, so you can look on with Maya. So it's possible. I said that. Where was I? Oh, okay. It's possible that the matter will take place in a brief amount of time, and the prophet will return immediately to his prior state. So he says, in this way, too, prophecy is like a dream. For a person can dream about weeks of events in a few seconds. And the Klach Pischei Chochma, the Ramchal writes that a prophecy can contain opposite visions at the same time. Just like one can dream contradictory things at the same time. But in all cases, during his prophecy, he will be freed of his senses and will temporarily sink into a deep slumber until he receives the prophecy. So the Ramchal thus concludes his explanation of how prophets, other than Moshe Rabbeinu, receive their prophecy through the medium of a dream. He next explains what is meant when the verse says that these other prophets perceive their prophecy in a vision. So, okay, it says a perception of prophets other than Moshe is like one who sees something through a mirror by which depicted objects can be viewed. So he says the term is used in the Gemara in Yevamos in reference to the vision of the prophets. The term aspeclaria can be translated either as a mirror or as a lens. And from the context here, it would appear that the Ramchal is using this term to mean mirror. With Ramchal, and then he says, Rav Chaim Friedlander explains that this mirror is actually the nefesh, the soul of the prophet who receives the prophecy. According to the purity of the prophet's own nefesh, to the extent that he has purified himself of defective traits of character, he will develop greater prophetic clarity. And so he continues. He says, but they cannot see with the same clarity of perception as one who sees his friend before him. Nor are they able to perceive like one who sees only through a single mirror. And he says, if a prophetic image was reflected only through a single mirror, it would suffer less distortion and be viewed with much greater clarity. So he says, rather, the vision is like one who sees through numerous mirrors, where the image is reflected from one to another. And in Das Devunos, the Ramchal cites, Rabbi Yehuda says, all prophets other than Moshe saw through 9 mirrors. When an image is reflected from mirror to mirror, it loses clarity. The Ramchal will explain the ramifications of this at the end of the section. Fine. So he says, however, what is seen is certainly one vision, and its movements can be seen through the mirrors, even though they are not viewing it directly. And he says the prophet is seeing the image in such a manner that he cannot be mistaken, as Ramchal stressed in the previous chapter. What he lacks is only a clear, direct view of the image. Rav Chaim Friedlander explains that the prophet sees his prophecy through the faculties of his soul, not through his physical senses. For example, if a prophet sees a lion, he does not see a physical lion like the one he sees in a zoo. Rather, he sees the spiritual roots of a lion. He merely describes the lion in physical terms so that people can understand it. The higher the level of the prophet, the more will be revealed to him regarding those spiritual roots. So there's also something interesting what he's bringing up. Just because the prophet says a lion doesn't mean a lion. He's giving us a representation we can understand. That's why when you read prophecies, it seems like they were on a good trip, if you will. Okay? And yet what they're just using is illustrate, according to Ramchal, or Rav Friedlander actually, is that they're using language that would allow us to see things, to understand things better. But they're really seeing the root, the spiritual root causes here. So it's something to keep in mind when you're looking at and reading the prophecies. Furthermore, their vision is like that of one who sees only through an unpolished mirror. And this is another opinion said in the Midrash, as cited in Das Tuvunot. The Ramchal there seems to understand the two opinions as conflicting, while here he treats them as complementing one another. And he says, so you may see through an unpolished mirror, by means of which it is not possible for him to see the object with complete clarity. Thus, in addition to not having a clear view, because of the reflections in multiple mirrors, the image also loses sharpness by being reflected from unpolished surfaces. Thus, it is not possible for them to see the glory of Hashem clearly, even after all of those mirror image reflections. She says, even after the image has been toned down to make it sustainable to such a prophet, he will still not be able to see with clarity. The Ramchal writes that this also leads to the fact that the prophet will not understand all the facets of the subject of his vision, but it does not cause any loss of accuracy in the prophecy, as Ramchal proceeds to explain. But again, for our sake, I'll give it the old-fashioned way. I have a TV with rabbit ears, I have a TV with cable, and I have a TV with HD. Depending on how much I train do you know what rabbit ears? Good. Okay. I'm saying for TV.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Everybody else I know does. So depending on what level I've trained myself and conditioned myself and went to school, if you will, for prophecy, will determine how I'm seeing it. By the way, I don't know, could TV work without an antenna? Oh, you always need an antenna, what? The old days.
Part
The
of
old
the
days.
circuit functions as one. Depends on how close.
Now it's in the old days.
Depends on how close you are to the
Okay.
transmitter.
Oh, there you go. So that would be even one more condition if I don't have an antenna. I don't know. I don't think I've been around for that one, but I never tried it.
UHF versus VHF.
Say it again?
UHF versus VHF.
Yeah, but if you didn't have the antenna, you couldn't get UHF.
Yeah.
I couldn't. Maybe you could. Okay. The point is that you could have snow, a lot of snow, and very bad reception, or you could have better reception. And by the way, even with today's new stuff that they have, what's it called? The box they have now. It's inside the TV. It's not a box anymore. What's it called? The new TVs. Digital. It's the worst thing in history that they forced us to get into, because unlike when you used to have snow, the show wouldn't stop. Then now you have digital. If you move or the wind blows the wrong way, it kills the whole reception, and it stops right there, and you can't go. You can't do anything with it, and so it's even worse. So I'm not sure if that's an improvement or what, but that would be what we're talking about. If I don't train myself, that's what you're looking at. Use TV as. Imagine an Orthodox rabbi saying use TV. Okay, use TV for these sort of things to understand the reception. Or it's like when even for radios when they still can do it. You can tune, you can find. They used to call it fine tuning. Mishagas. It's just tuning. But if you have that, you can sometimes get in between channels, right? But it goes in, out, depending on where you're traveling. So that's the same sort of thing that we're talking about. How much did I train myself? How much investment did I make to have this perception? That's all. Okay.
It's a good analogy because all of these have to do with focus.
Right. It's all focus, right? Well, I try to give them a good analogy, so.
I feel like the difference between a dream and a daydream.
Uh-huh.
A daydream is when you're out of focus. A dream is when you're in focus. You're focusing all these thoughts in your mind. It might be from the day. It
Right.
could be prophecy. It could be.
Well, the daydream.
The difference of clarity.
Right. The daydream could also, though, be when you're allowing your mind to just go. Right. So, and that's when normally when you're daydreaming is when you come up with your best ideas, because you're relaxed. You're not so focused. It's the unfocused focusing. So it's an oxymoron, but it's how it works. So he says this is so, even though that when they are seeing, what they are seeing is truly the glory of Hashem, they have no doubt about this at all. She says the prophet has no doubts about his vision, even though it is through the medium of many unpolished mirrors. In Das Tevunot, the Ramchal explains that this is the meaning of the verse, and he perceives a picture of Hashem. Whatever distortions there are, he knows that what he is seeing is reflection of Hashem's glory. Although the passage refers to the prophecy of Moshe, the Ramchal learns that this aspect of prophecy is applicable to all prophets. She says, in all of this as well, there are many levels with a distinction existing from prophet to prophet. For one prophet may have a more polished mirror image than his peer, and he can therefore perceive with greater clarity. And however, whatever the clarity, the prophet who grasps all of this perceives the matter as it really is. Thus, it becomes clear to him that the one who is revealing himself and making himself known to him is the Creator. And that, he explains, is the very heart of prophecy. The prophet attains a state of devekas to Hashem, who reveals his glory to the prophet. Furthermore, he will grasp the nature of the mirror, its reality and its secret. And he says the prophet will gain an understanding of his own soul. and he will grasp and comprehend the concepts that are being bestowed upon him with truth and clarity, as we have mentioned above in chapter 3. He says, thus the prophet has no doubts about the truth of his prophecy, even though it is seen through an unpolished mirror vision. So now the Ramchal summarizes the features of the prophecy of most prophets. He says, just as Hashem's glory is revealed to him through all of these reflected images, so too the knowledge that reaches him will be by means of riddles and metaphors. And he said, the Ramchal has stated repeatedly that the essence of prophecy is his devekus to Hashem, through which Hashem becomes revealed to the prophet, and which enables the prophet to grasp information beyond normal human comprehension. Just as the image of Hashem's glory is not perceived directly, the accompanying knowledge is also not given directly, but rather in riddles. Rav Chaim Friedlander explains, using his example above, that when the prophet sees the spiritual sources of the lion, he is only seeing a metaphor of Hashem's direction of the world. For example, the glory of Hashem is in a parable form. 3 stages emerge in this description of prophecy. First is the glory of Hashem itself. Second is the vision that the prophet receives. And the third, the physical image that he conveys to us. So that's where he's going with this. And he says, right. So to the knowledge that reaches him will be, I'm sorry. And the prophet will receive his prophecy through the medium of a dream, which is the means through which prophecy comes about, as mentioned above. So this is the element of prophecy that the Ramchal explained in the previous section. He thus concludes the section with a summary of the 2 features of ordinary prophecy. 1, that it comes through the medium of a dream, and 2, the prophet does not see the glory of Hashem directly, but rather through a series of quote-unquote mirrors. Okay? So we understand what's going on? You're going to get them in dreams when you're not fully awake, or in a dreamlike state, whatever the case is going to be. And on top of that, you won't see a clear vision. You'll see a fuzzy, or through different mirrors. If you look, actually, I have a mirror when I put the film on. So I use the mirror to make sure it's right here, right? So what happens? Somebody gave me a nice mirror, and I had an old mirror that's scratched up. If I use the one that's scratched up, you don't see it as clear. It's very hard to see through that. So the nice polished one is very simple to see. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here. If I see a vision, but it's a clouded thing, like I said, the snow on UHF. They don't even know what UHF is. Okay, so in the old days they had channels 4, 5, and 7. Okay, that was regular TV. Then you had channels 25. You see, you don't have these channels anymore. But you have 25, 38, and so on and so forth. I'm using Boston channels. But they were on UHF. So in order to get UHF, you had to have this round antenna on the back, and you would have to maneuver it.
I'm not familiar with cable at all.
Say it again?
We don't have cable, so I'm not familiar with
No, this is no cable.
Right, I know. I'm not familiar with the channel stuff.
Okay, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is these channels were not major channels. They were the side channels. I don't know how else to say UHF, but it's they weren't what? Local. Shorter range. So what happened was, no matter what you did, you had to maneuver the antenna, but it would always be snowy. It was never clear. I don't think all the hockey games were snowy. It makes sense for hockey games, but any one of the sports, you thought you were looking through a snowstorm. That's what you look like. That's what we're talking about. If I'm seeing prophecy through a snowstorm, if you will, where it's not so clear, first of all, I'm going to miss a lot of things. Again, if I have HD TV clear, I'm not missing anything. I'm seeing the sweat on the brow. That's all they say about HD TV. I don't have HD, I don't know. But they say that's what you see. If you have digital, again, you're seeing a pretty clear picture. But if anybody looks at my old videos, The very first videos we made, before we had all this wonderful thing, this microphone, this camera, you can see the quality is much different. This is great quality. Okay, I can go like this, and my hands move the proper way, unlike the other one, it went like this. It's slow. And by the time it finished, I was it's all over the place. Okay, but this is much better. Okay, so this would be your HD TV. So you have to go online, watch my old stuff, watch my new stuff, watch all my stuff. This is an ad to watch everything. Okay, but it's but you'll see the difference in quality. Also in sound also changes. All because of, as the more sophisticated we become in the Torah Center, the more we spend your money, the better the quality gets. That's how it works. Okay. So that's really so when you're looking at prophecy, you have to think about the same thing. That prophecy, the more I worked out, the more with my teachers, the more I experienced it, the more finesse I had and I could figure out what was going on. But when I started out, and even with all that, that's his point, even with all that, it was still cloudy vision. It still wasn't clear because I was seeing it through different mirrors. And depending on how far I was, it could have been 10 mirrors, 9 mirrors, 8 mirrors, whatever. Okay, and they're all unpolished. So now we look to, what time is it? I tell you what, we'll stop here on this part where we're getting to Moshe. Okay, stop here.